Gianandrea Noseda is now here in New York because he's conducting Roméo and Juliette at Metropolitan Museum.
Opera.
And also Museum of the Opera, the Museum of the Opera. By Gounod, and it's also last year he was here for a French opera. It's Le Pêcheur de Perles by Bizet. So I think it's also interesting to ask him why he's conducting. Is it an Italian conductor who is conducting French operas at the if you want to go and see this opera, also tomorrow is the third or the fourth performances, and there are performances until 28th of January, and then a resume in March, but without Noseda like the conductor, so you have to go now. Okay, as I said, it's the first conversation of our series. The next one will be with Rinaldo Alessandrini on 20th of February. Rinaldo Alessandrini will be here in the La Serenissima Festival at Calibio. It's a festival about Venetian music, and we also participate in it with the final year and the conversation with Rinaldo Alessandrini, and then we are going to have here Marco Emiliato, Nicola Luisotti, and in the end we hope to have here not a conductor, pianist, Maurizio Pollini, who are going to be here in New York and on the next May, and we hope to have here to speak with us and about his fantastic career. As previous year, the conversation will be conducted by Harvey Sachs, is our Virgilio, in conversation with our Italian conductor. That's all. Enjoy, and the floor to Harvey Sachs and Gianandrea Noseda.
Thank you. So, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone, and welcome. I did a little research, and I figured out why it is that Maestro Noseda is the perfect conductor for doing Romeo and Juliet. It's because he has the same birthday as William Shakespeare, right? 23rd of April. So, you too? Okay, very good. So, it's like a convergence of the stars somehow or other. But I did want to begin by talking a little bit about French opera in particular, because this is, as Giorgio van Straten just said, Maestro Noseda last year conducted Bizet, Pêcheur de Perles, the Pearl Fishers at the Met. This year, Roméo and Juliette of Gounod. And French opera is sort of in a category of its own. And if you excuse me, because I'm a music historian, I'll just bore you for a couple of minutes. French opera begins in Italy. Opera itself, of course, begins in Italy at the end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th century. But it was Italian opera that seeped into France around the middle of the 17th century. And then it was a Florentine composer, Giovan Battista Lully, who became Jean-Baptiste Lully, who became the first great French opera composer. And of course, from there were Rameau, there were many, many other important French composers, and French opera developed in a direction sort of its own, at the same time, of course, as Italian and German opera were developing in their directions. So we have, especially in the 19th century, composers from Berlioz to Bizet to later on Massenet, of course Gounod in between, and on and on and on to Debussy in the early 20th century with Péléas et Mélisande, and so on. Now, what is it that distinguishes French opera from Italian opera or German opera? In a way, nothing in particular, on the one hand. I mean, they are all developing the European musical language at the same time. But on the other hand, there is something special about French opera. There's something special about the diction, about the sound, the way the voice is used in French opera. And so I thought that perhaps we could begin by talking a little bit about that. But before we do that, I want to show you very briefly some excerpts from a rehearsal, I think maybe an ensemble rehearsal, of another French opera, Gounod's Faust, which was probably the most often performed opera in the second half of the 19th century, a production that Maestro Noseda was conducting at the Teatro Regio in Turin, of which he is music director, I think in 2015. And you can see here some of the action that goes on, everything from people trying to adjust their costumes to Maestro Noseda himself pulling the orchestra along and coordinating with the stage. So if we could see that for a moment.
Solo nel cambio finale che facciamo.
Signori professori, sono invitati a prendere posto in orchestra.
Atto quinto.
Noi vogliamo stare zitti, senza rientro che si sta alzando.
questo accordo finale è... Quando abbiamo fortissimo, il recitativo in due sarà solo forte, dopo P il fortissimo diventa forte, dopo P il fortissimo diventa forte, poi sforzato e poi subito mezzo piano. Terza battuta, sforzato e poi subito mezzo piano. Quinta battuta, fortissimo, mezzo forte subito. E le ultime due battute prima di moderato, 3 F come è scritto. Prego. 3 prima di 215. E, A. Su 4, facciamo questa battuta, su 4 tutti che tolgono, prego, e 1.
So, what I would like to ask Maestro Noseda now is to talk a little bit about what happens before you get to the point of an ensemble rehearsal where you have the singers on stage, the chorus on stage, the orchestra in the pit, the sets on the stage. There's a whole long process before that. Perhaps you could just summarize.
First of all, good evening. In any opera, not only in the French opera, when you do any production in any theater, all these elements, so have you seen some choreographic moment during the Walpurgisnacht? So all the elements have to be rehearsed separately. So at the beginning, you do music rehearsal with the singers at the piano, so soloist, conductor, and pianist. There is where I think the opera, the building up of the opera should start, from the relationship between singers and conductor. After that, you start rehearsing only the orchestra, so without anybody else, just conductor and orchestra. In the meanwhile, the director is rehearsing with the company, with the soloist. One rehearsal is, I have a chorus meister. Any theater, any opera house has his own chorus meister, which is a huge cooperator, for a huge help for a conductor. So he rehearsed the chorus, but in one of the rehearsals, I go there, I will just rehearse the chorus. And after that, little by little, you put all the puzzle together. Just you put together singers and orchestra and the director. And this is one of the first rehearsal called the stage orchestra, where everybody is there. So it's important to be incredibly efficient, incredibly organized. But if you did the previous work properly, it's not going to be a disaster. It's usually a nice surprise when you put everything together and you think, oh, it's not bad. So from that starting point, you start really to build up all the performance. In the meanwhile, like the designers, they are making some rehearsals, usually during the night time, because during the night, no rehearsals for soloist, conductor, and orchestra. They use the time after the evening rehearsal. And costumes are made in the theater, usually, unless you rent the production from another theater. So, and that's why opera, I call the opera a miracle when it works, because it's made of so many elements, and to have the control of everything is fascinating from one side. It's tough, difficult from another side, but when happens once every 50 performances, you have the great performance. I don't mean the other 49 are bad, but when you have the feeling in one particular performance, everything goes well. And you realize that because it seems easy what you are doing. You don't have to force. It's just coming along very naturally. But it's very rare. And when it happens, it's really like to touch the sky with your fingers, as we say in Italy, because it's really a miracle. Because, you have the singers, if one singer is not feeling well, or the orchestra one night is a little bit less concentrated for no reasons. You cannot predict. So when you go to the opera house, there is no reason for not repeating what we are doing all the process. But that is actually what is happening. You have to be on yourself, because if the conductor is not on, the problems start to come. I have to say
the energy.
You have always to motivate, because especially here at the Metropolitan Opera, they change production every night. The performance, so the orchestra sees every night a different conductor, different singers, different. So it could become a sort of high level routine, and to fight against this, you have to be there from minute one is already too late. From second one, to be there and to show, oh, I'm here. Whatever is happening, I'm here. And this is one of the duty of a conductor. You have to be there. You don't have to allow yourself to be lazy or just to keep it. Take it easy. Here is take it easy. No, you don't have to take it easy. You have to be there, and try to make easy for the other people, but not for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a bit about specifically doing French opera, since this is what you're doing right now and what you did here last year?
The French opera came in my life in a very strange way. I've never decided to do particularly French opera. I'm very curious, so I like any kind of repertoire, so German opera, Russian opera, Spanish opera, Italian opera, French opera. But somehow the Metropolitan asked me to do, in the last 2 seasons, 2 French operas. So, but I'm not specialized in French opera. I just treat it as any opera. What is particularly fascinating from my point of view, being an Italian, is the fact the French opera is a little bit, said by that, sounds a little bit negative, less precise. I try to explain what I mean. You need to, in the French opera, you need to create the environment. You have to create the field where everything is possible, where everything can take its own position. In Italian opera, especially Verdi, but also Puccini, is very much angular. You can feel immediately the change of the atmosphere. With one note, Verdi changes the atmosphere from the most beautiful and tender calmness to the most violent aggressivity in less than 1 second. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen in a French opera. It takes more time. I don't say there are not dramatic moments or just beautiful, ecstatic moments, but the way to go, one lead to the next one, is more organic, is more natural, is more like the French language, no? With all the les États-Unis, no? Gli Stati Uniti d'America, just to say your country, no? United States, gli Stati Uniti d'America, les États-Unis. It's just there is this kind of connection of the language, and of course, being Gounod a French composer, a Bizet a French composer, they know how to deal with this kind of sound. So
It's
the horizon,
atmosphere. It's the atmosphere.
Are nuances, are just making people imagine an atmosphere. For instance, in Gounod, Roméo and Juliette, at the beginning of second act in the garden, the orchestration is so simple. We have an harp, you have just the strings playing pianissimo. Is the most simple way to orchestrate a night, a moonlight elements, but it's so fantastic. Verdi, probably after 20 seconds of that atmosphere, needed a change or something, you know, to underline a rat is coming in the garden. I don't know, I'm inventing. A stupid idea, but Verdi was kind of, just one spy from 007 is coming behind, so there is a sort of uncertainty. With Gounod, no. There is this fantastic moonlight in the summer in Italy, because the action takes place in Verona, as you know. Also, this is very intriguing. A British writer who writes a play that takes place in Verona, orchestrated the music composed by a French, conducted by an Italian with American company, with a soprano German, and so it's intriguing, no? And all under the hat of Shakespeare, which of course, as Harvey was mentioning, was born on 23rd of April as myself, exactly 400 years before myself, because it was 23rd of April 1564. I was born 23rd of April 1964. But what is most interesting and a little bit, let's say, scary, he died the 23rd of April, 1616. So this year, I mean, the 2016, when it turned the 23rd of April, I didn't go out of my house. I stayed inside. I waited until the midnight was over. I said, no, now, at least for this year, I'm almost safe.
Drink a glass of champagne.
Absolutely,
right?
I celebrated. So the 001 a.m. of the 24th, we were celebrating. That is maybe the difference. And for me, which being Italian, I like the differences of atmosphere, to find the calmness, to stay there, the patience also to be there. And I have also on stage Vittorio Grigolo, which is also Italian singer. He likes very much the action, and Diana as well. And to put all our energies, but to keep these long moments of ecstasies. That is particularly tough, difficult, demanding.
Yeah.
It is a challenge.
Yeah. I thought maybe we could watch one more excerpt before we go on. This is from last year's production of Les Pêcheurs de Perles, the Pearl Fishers, here at the Met with Maestro Noseda. Could we see one of, there are several little excerpts that have been put onto YouTube. That was very short, but interesting. Thinking about, just now about Bizet, also this idea of the atmosphere. If you think about the intermezzo with the flute and harp from Carmen, you know, where he creates this extended feeling of a sort of calmness in the middle of what is, in fact, an extremely dramatic plot, an extremely dramatic opera. It corresponds to what you were saying about Gounod also.
I think also Gounod, more than Massenet and Bizet, talking about Faust I did in Torino, and this Roméo and Juliette, I think the beginning of Roméo and Juliet doesn't sound as a French opera, or at least I don't conduct it as a French opera, because there is this kind of very powerful statement at the beginning. You immediately are taken in a very dramatic atmosphere, because the tension of the two families, the Capuletti and Montecchi, and of course Giulietta is a son of Capuletti family, and the other one, Roméo, from the Montecchi. It's difficult, and there is a fugue at the beginning, pam pam pam, very active, and the fugue. If you take a fugue in a fast, quick tempo, immediately gives impression of anxiety or uncertain feeling, and so it doesn't start like Pêcheur de Perles or Faust with this kind of very calm atmosphere. Calm doesn't mean where a place where nothing is going to happen. For instance, in Faust, there are two strong chords. After that, this chromatism. When you use chromatism, the chromatism means use the notes, the closest notes one after the other. So just Do, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, the closest semitones. And that creates a sort of big tension. The master of that is Wagner. So how Wagner uses the chromatism changed the history of the music, actually, because I always say there is the music before Tristan und Isolde, and there is the music after Tristan und Isolde. Because all the composers started to use this chromatism more and more after Tristan. And Gounod did it, and Verdi did it. If you compare Otello with Rigoletto or Traviata, to masterpieces by Verdi, Otello is much more chromatic, is much more the tension in Otello. Traviata is not an opera for girls and boys, so the argument are there, so the plot is very intriguing and very, very tough. Having said that, so there are also moments where even the French composers try to look a little bit more Italian. That is, I am supposed to say in this place, you know.
We put in a little plug for Italy here. No, but actually I was just thinking, do you think that some of that introductory material in Roméo, that he got the idea, I won't say stole, but got the idea from Berlioz' Roméo?
Absolutely.
The contrapuntal.
Absolutely.
And the idea of having this sort of commentary from the
But of course, Berlioz has been probably the craziest composer ever. What I mean craziest, the one you don't expect to come out in those years. He was a guitarist, unique, you know? And the vision he had, he was not ashamed about anything. He wanted to write something which was probably that was against all the rules of how to make a phrase with the music, how to make a chord. He said, "Who cares? I do it." Why? Because for me, dramatically is correct, and that also has been something incredibly new. Was an explosion. Was really atomic explosion, nuclear explosion in the first half of the 19th century. If you consider la Symphonie Fantastique, but Roméo Juliette, Symphonie Dramatique, Opus 17, starts almost in the same way with this fugue. Viole sole. Can you imagine to start in 1831 with viola solo, with this tempo? I can imagine the violas players in that was probably they were not able to play, period. He didn't care. I want this. I want to create tension. After the viola started the second violins. So he didn't start the fugue with the first violins and the cellos, usually at those time the best sections in the strings. Violas, I was surprised didn't start with the contrabassi. That would probably be a disaster, no?
Disaster.
But it's incredible how advanced was Berlioz in his conception about the music. Of course, Gounod, Massenet, there is a inch in, so contrasting this creation of big painting, big atmosphere, long moments of ecstasies, there are elements of craziness. But come on, are not the French like that? I mean, in a good way, with respect. You expect this kind of big, charming people, suddenly they have something like that. It's like a champagne, you know?
Or maybe
Which
it's
is
just musicians who are like that, no?
I think is part also of the culture. That's why we like France, because you know, there are moments of creativity, of genius, absolutely unpredictable. With an Italian, you can predict something is going to happen. You don't know when and
sometimes.
where. You don't know when and where, but you expect that. You say, my mother says when I was, let's say, behaving too well for too long, she started to be worried. Yeah. So, what is happening? Why? You are preparing something or what? And but you expect from an Italian. With the French people, it's incredible because they are so charmant, so incredibly nice, and the sound of the language is a little bit slippery with this kind of all the sounds. So we have one o, and they have 5 different types. No, it's incredible. Even that makes very seductive the way they speak, and the music is going along
by the language.
But,
sure.
but even the music without voice, without vocal lines.
Right.
Take the Nocturne by Debussy.
Absolutely.
There is the same element of slippery and all glissando, portamento between the notes.
Yeah.
In Nuage, is incredible.
Going back to, I think it's interesting for the laity, the non-musicians here, to going back to one of the points that Maestro Noseda just made. In the early 19th century, and in fact through the 19th century, opera orchestras were not stable generally. They were and musicians were re-engaged season by season. And so the level of playing was not what it is today, not by any stretch of the imagination. And so some of the things that composers like Beethoven, of course, in his day, then Berlioz, then Wagner, the more adventurous composers demanded were impossible for the players of their day, and techniques had to be developed. And even towards the end of the 19th century, you mentioned the double basses. The double basses in Otello, and at the beginning of the last act of Otello, there's this solo passage for the double basses as a section. When Verdi supervised the premiere of Otello in 1887, he gave up. He said, let's just have one double bass play it, because when they play it together, it's out of tune completely. Now, this would be unthinkable today. So,
it's still difficult.
It's very difficult.
That is still
It's very
difficult.
difficult.
But if you consider all the recitativos at the end of Beethoven 9 Symphony, cellos and contrabassi, and he wrote in Italian, no, in French, selon le caractère d'un récitatif, mais in tempo. So, recitativo ma in tempo is like to say soccer and basketball. So,
Loud and soft.
Both are sports, yes, of course, but one you use hands and the other you use your feet. So, it's intriguing how. But I have to say something because, Gounod, invented, with Roméo and Juliette, created this sound of the celli section divided in four lines, which has been taken after that by Verdi in Otello at the end of the first act, with the love scene, Desdemona and Otello, Puccini in Tosca. As far as I remember, has been the first attempt to write just that with the celli divided in four. Just to create that kind of sound. So all is the same thing happened with the wine. They created the wine, and we learned from Italy the way to make wine from the French. You know, it costs a lot for me to admit that, but is how the story went. Yeah, and that is so. Of course, as an Italian, I think our wines is superior, but we don't have to forget. We learn from them, from the French. Yeah.
Let's watch one more short excerpt, please, from this is again from the Pearl Fishers production last year at the Met. So what about do you have more French operas in your future that you have planned already, or is this?
As far as I remember, I would like sooner rather than later to do Werther. But I don't have the plan to do it, so I have also to find the time to learn it properly.
How about Berlioz operas? Are you interested in doing them?
Berlioz operas, are so long.
Not all Benvenuto Cellini.
Yeah, but the basic problem is just to find the time to learn it. Because I remember when Valery Gergiev, I was still a younger conductor, he told me, take advantage of the time you have now, because when you will, if your activity as a conductor will develop, the time will shrink. You will have always less time to learn. But you have to learn better, because people is expecting a certain quality. So when I plan operas, especially long operas, I have to plan carefully. And I'm intrigued by Le Troyen very much.
That's a long opera.
But at least I have to find the right time to. It's the same with Wagner. This fall I will do my first Tristan, and I have to start in Turin. I will open the season, with Tristan und Isolde, and I have to find the time to learn it already starting in April, May. Otherwise, because if you have 2 months' time, you can do Tristan, but in meanwhile you have other things to do. So. Yeah, and now I have to do my first Manon Lescaut, so I have to learn Manon Lescaut immediately after my first Fiery Angel Prokofiev.
Wow.
So it's, but never say no or never.
Right, never say never, yes.
But it's nice. I think French music, even if I don't have a plan to do French opera in the future, in the near future, helps me when I do symphonic repertoire, French symphonic repertoire, or when I go back to the Russian repertoire after having done French opera. In a way helps me. I spent 10 years in St. Petersburg, so I know what means Russian music. But Prokofiev wrote the Three Love Oranges in Paris, and Stravinsky fled to the French part of Switzerland. They spent time in Paris with all the ballet, the Firebird, the Petrushka, and the Rite of Spring. So there is a connection between these two worlds. At the beginning of the 18th century, in the court in St. Petersburg of Katerina just before, everybody was speaking French fluently, although all the composers in the court were Italians, but that's just a twist.
The architects.
The architects, Rastrelli, Quarenghi were Italians. In a way, as once Valery Gergiev said, let's have a toast, talking about St. Petersburg, let's have a toast to one of the most beautiful Italian cities. He was right, because it was made by Italians, yes.
Speaking of Italy, since we are here in the Italian Cultural Institute, let's talk a little bit about the situation of opera in Italy today. You're in charge of one of the very finest of the Italian opera ensembles, the Teatro Regio in Turin. What is the situation with, let's say, the top 4 or 5, but also going down a little bit under that? Because Italy, as most of us know, in its day had opera companies in every town and village, and that's not the case anymore.
No, it's not the case. Probably there is not the request for that.
Of course.
I think we have to face a new era. If you consider 50 years ago, 40 years ago, with some singers, you would sell out the house for 20 performances of any opera. I mentioned some, no? At the beginning of the century, Caruso, but even in more recent years with Pavarotti, Domingo, it was easy to sell out 12, 15 performances of Trovatore, just to name one, or any opera. Now, I think if we have to find out singers or conductors were the same. When Toscanini was conducting here, even in the small studio at the NBC, was an event, and all America was listening through the radio, the broadcast. So Toscanini became famous because he left Italy and came to America, in a way. Because, of course, he was famous, not completely, but when he went back to Italy from America, was Toscanini, and Victor De Sabato, who was always based in Italy, was not considered at the same level of popularity, because the talent was equally important in both men. So, but even if you consider Fritz Reiner in Chicago, Ormandy in Philadelphia, they were incredibly hot sellers. Or Kusevitsky in Boston, or George Szell in Cleveland. We can name many of these Mitropoulos and Bernstein here with the New York Philharmonic. And now to find either a conductor or a singer able, just with his or her name, to sell out 20 performances, believe me, you don't find it. Even the greatest, even the one you think they will do it. No. We have many more offers about arts entertainment. It's a different time, it's a different era. Probably I will not expect in important opera house to have more than 8, 9 performances in a run. Once they did really 18, 20 performances. So it's difficult. Getting back to your question in Italy. Italy, of course, it's the cradle, you say, of the opera. Cradle of the opera. And I remember theaters in Adria, in these places, absolutely not familiar to you unless you come from there. And you know, there are some recordings made in Pavia, in Piacenza, with Tebaldi, with Pavarotti. So they went there when they were young singers. And now those theaters, they don't have any activity unless some concerts, 5, 6, or 7 concerts a year. It's a pity, yes, but it's also a sign of the time. Probably there is not the request for that. To expect the public money from the Italian government to support all the musical activity in the theaters and the symphonic institution in Italy probably is not really possible anymore, realistic. So what we probably should do, I'm working in this direction, is try to find the way to combine the public money with the private sponsorship. And the question is just to find the right balance. But the situation, because now in Italy we realized is going to be like this, we have to face this reality, we have to move in this direction. The only thing we don't have to change is just to try to reach the highest possible quality and to present it to the audience. Because the audience is very much exigent, how you can say. Exigent, because, you know, we are in the era of the web, we are always connected, the movies, and, you know, just to see some sets like in the 60s and the 70s, if they are not incredibly well done, you don't believe it, unless you are attached to the idea of the old days. Yeah. So that is the story. So we have to be realistic. We have to be even artistically more involved as performers, or at least as involved as our predecessors. And not allow ourselves to become indulgent with ourselves, and to present. I think people are not ready to subscribe for 25 operas in a year. They decide last minute. I'm interested in this opera. I buy the ticket. I go. Or they do now, instead of 25 operas, I subscribe for 5 or 6, and let's see how it goes. So I think from one side we have less subscribers, but from the other side we have more people buying ticket last minute.
Single tickets, yes.
Single tickets. So, but to organize a season,
it's difficult.
It is difficult. So what is in which direction we should go? Something very popular, just to attract people, but after a while, people will not, they will not come if you just present always over and over and over again the same soup. Mm-hmm. They want to find, to try a different soup with a different vegetable, with some meat or fish inside, or maybe fish and meat, or maybe, I don't know. We have to be very creative. But in a way, artists always in the history had to be very creative.
Absolutely. It's also, as you say, it's a different time. In the old days, 100 years ago, opera companies in Europe, and to some extent even here, they operated on the impresario system. So the impresario invested in productions which were much simpler than they are today. You didn't have built-out staging. You had painted backdrops, and you could use the same castle painting for one opera that you used in another opera that had a castle in it. Everything was much easier from the visual point of view. And you know, they would do as many performances as the audience would continue to pay to go to. So if the opera was very popular with singers who drew the public or conductor who drew the public, they could do 20 or 25 performances. If the opera was a flop, it would close after a single performance or two performances. And then they would be ready, you know, in a couple of days with the next production. You can't do that now. You have to schedule everything. Also, the musicians' unions, just absolutely correctly, they want to know in advance, am I going to be employed for 3 months or for 2 days? You know, everything has to be organized long in advance, and it creates a whole different system than functioned 100 years ago or more.
But 100 years ago and 200 years ago, if we consider the commission for new operas were constantly there.
Absolutely.
And I think in this respect, we are not serving very well our field, because we are worried we don't commission new operas, or very rarely. Yeah. This is a tragedy. Oh, but people, they will not come. Who knows? But they will not come to see again the same La Bohème. Mm. They will, but not. I was talking today with one of my people in Torino. He told me in early 90s we could sell out 25 performances of La Bohème. Also because La Bohème was premiered in Torino in 1896, 1st of February. So it's a sort of opera that we think belonged to us. No? Now, I did a new production of La Bohème in October to open this season, 16-17. We did 9 productions. All the performances were sold out. But to recreate interest, we had to do a new production, very modern, very contemporary, incredibly well received, very provocative. Mm. But if you don't do either one thing or the other, why people will go to the opera? Mm. When you go to the movie, you have the most incredible effects on the cinema. In 1900, the movie were not there. Right. So whatever, and the singers, they were traveling with their costumes. And they put for Trovatore or for the same costume. So can you imagine, I would have liked to see Caruso acting. Probably today would not been accepted.
Right. They had the stop
just
gestures.
Stopping, just
yeah.
Now, oh, you say, but the great voices. Yes, great voices. We still have great voices, but if they don't act properly, you don't believe that. It's impossible. You cannot recreate the same elements of 100 years ago. And we will be out of time.
Yeah, and the other thing that you mentioned, I mean, about the audiences wanting new operas, especially at the main opera houses. Yeah. They didn't want to hear, in 1900, they didn't want to hear Il Trovatore, they didn't want to hear Rigoletto. Those were 50 years old. They wanted new works, new works. And Tullio Serafin in his memoirs mentions, that when Toscanini decided to stage Il Trovatore at La Scala in 1902, he had to fight to put it on because he was convinced that it had to be revived in a serious way and not just thrown together. But the public didn't want it. When it was done, it was a tremendous success. But he had to fight, he even had to fight Giulio Ricordi, the publisher, didn't want him to do it. He was afraid that people would laugh it off the stage. They wanted new operas, new operas, new operas, and that's totally changed now. Although now it's more the small companies here in New York and other cities and also in Europe. It's the smaller companies that take the risks and put on the. If you do something new at the Met, you have to fill a theater with almost 4,000 seats in it, and it's a big problem.
Of course, there is no probably the curiosity to, if you have a CD, now a CD are not going to, new songs from a pop star, after 2 months is old. You want something new. That probably was the same thing with the opera 150 years ago. Okay, Trovatore, I heard. Next. What is the next Verdi? Oh, Verdi died. Okay, Puccini, let's see.
Right.
Puccini died. Okay, let's see another one, next one. And thanks to that, we have so many operas. But what will be the opera we give to in 100 years from now? Will exist still? I hope so. I'm not sure.
Very hard to say.
Very hard to say.
Yeah.
Unless we find the way to connect and to present the opera. But you cannot force the opera to be something different because the opera is the opera. But you have to use all the elements you have to make the opera to sound and to look more believable. That is also the point. And I'm very passionate about opera.
Yeah.
But you know, I try also to be very pragmatic. It's otherwise I will feel like Don Quixote against the windmills. So we have to be very conscious. We have to preserve. No, we have to revitalize, not to preserve. What we preserve? Preserve. Right. You put the sauce in the frigidaire. Preserve, and you put in the yeah. Is still I still believe is a live art form.
Absolutely.
But has to be taken as a live art form. And a live art form needs new operas. And the new operas will enlighten the repertoire ones. But if we just... but people will not follow. Beethoven was not followed with the last quartets. Mozart was not followed. But now we know Mozart, we don't know Dittersdorf or Hummel. Right. They were much more famous than Mozart at the time, or Salieri. Mozart couldn't sell out the last Academy. Academy was a concert. He tried to find sponsors. He had one attending a concert. It's one of the most devastating and Mozart playing and to have one in the audience. It happened in 1789. He died in 1791. One of the biggest genius God gave to us. So, and Beethoven was understood with the last piano sonatas, the last quartets, Missa Solemnis. Verdi, when he composed Falstaff, he got the success of the respect, but Falstaff has not been understood completely. And you know, it's tough. It's tough if we see all the life of the great composers. Also Bach. Bach was considered a teacher. All the keyboards exercise he composed just to give to his students. Okay, so he was just composing continuously to give new exercise because the old exercise. Can you imagine in the world who was much slower than our world? Because 300 years from the 15th century to the 18th century, what were the discoveries? Was much. Now every 3 years we are new, completely renewed. At that time, music was created not daily, weekly. So Bach composed a sacred cantata every single week of the year. And not only he composed, he rehearsed, he performed. And the next week again, Monday morning, okay, he had a lot of kids to look after. He had business activity because he wanted to be successful, and he wrote letters to get certain jobs. He didn't get it. And he found out being blind and just dictating some of the music he wanted to put on the paper.
In his last years.
In his last years, from 1747 till 1750.
He even had to, because he was in charge of the school at the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, excuse me, he had to check and make sure that the kids blew out the candles at night and that they weren't staying up too late. That was one of Bach's duties. Yes. Yeah. So also, you know, if you think, I mean, we think Vienna, city that, you know, produced so much greatness. Vienna in the year 1800 had 200 composers living in the city, and of those 200, we remember Haydn and Beethoven, and that's all. We don't remember. Schubert was alive, but he was only 3 years old, so he doesn't count. You know, there was this tremendous desire for music to be performed in the home. It was the home entertainment system of the day, and you know, they produced tremendous amounts of music. Today, the situation is.
But also
totally
consider everybody was playing an instrument.
right. In the
But-
bourgeois families.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what kind of quality? Because since Paganini arrived, Liszt arrived, the way to make music the way they did was put everything in a different level. Only Paganini was able to play his 24th Capriccio. Only Liszt himself was able to play the 12 Etudes de Discussion Transcendentale. And now, a good violinist, a talented violinist, 18 years old, is able to play the 24 Capricci by Paganini. But before Paganini, probably many people were able to produce a sort of good music to the violin. After Paganini, now you have to just face this reality. You have to be excellent. If you are not able to play the 24 Capricci by Paganini plus the sonate by Isaïe, you cannot make the profession. So also, that is absolutely true. When I hear about the quality of the playing, the performing skills in the 40s, in the 50s, today we have the most incredible orchestras and the most incredible players. The technical precision, you know, you cannot, sometimes, you know, about interpretation. Yeah, but how many wrong notes? But Cortot, fantastic player. If you hear some recordings, so many wrong notes. And at that time was still accepted because of the charisma, the flamboyant personality. If today you play with that amount, that quantity of wrong notes, you don't go through the first round of any competition. Zero. You don't have chance. You don't have possibilities. So also the level is incredibly high. The competition is incredibly high, and the orchestras are diminishing. So all the people who are now are just studying in the conservatorium or in the colleges or in the Juilliard Curtis, where they are going to end up? That's also is, but I'm not negative. I'm optimistic. We have to find the way to have very few schools for great professionals and the rest to teach music for everybody who will not become a professional but will encounter, will meet the music, will live with the music. Not everybody is born to become a Pollini. Right. It was mentioned Pollini, Maurizio Pollini, or Benedetti Michelangeli. Just to mention Italians, but you know, Sviatoslav Richter, Emil Gilels, Sofronitsky, John Ogden, or Weissenberg. We can. How many of these people are born in once every 15 years? I remember when I was pushed in the conservatorium. Oh, you have to become like Pollini. If you are not as good as this, what are you studying to play piano? Come on, not everybody is born to become Pollini. So that means I don't have to approach music, I don't have to be able to play the piano in a more than acceptable way. Yeah. So it becomes very intriguing how to organize all the school progression for a musician. It's important. Now, people, I always say this, we had the open position for principal cello in the Opera House in Torino, Teatro Regio Torino, and it was open, and the 5 finalists, the 5 who arrived to the final round to get just that position were all stunningly talented. If I could have the possibility, I would have hired everybody of them. I had to make a decision, only one. It was behind the screen, so it was just a blind audition. So not even, oh, this is more beautiful, that's more handsome. No, just the sound they produced. And the one who won the position is a 28 years old boy, young man from Campobasso. The Italians know where Campobasso is, in Molise. What can come out from Campobasso? Let's be fair. This guy is one of the most talented cellists I've ever heard. He's 20 years old, and the others 5, one from Torino, one from Cosenza, one from a lady from Treviso, incredible players. This level of playing, when I was a teenager of their age, was not there. Was not there. We had a fantastic pick, but the rest, now the level, the average level is incredibly high, very competitive. I'm crazy, drives me nuts to see all these people, and they deserve to be seated in that chair where is occupied by one who is not as good. Mm-hmm. But that chair is taken. Mm-hmm. So how to deal with these kind of things? Of course, today you don't get the job for life. I remember my father, when you get a job, you have to be for life. That was his idea. You know, he came out, he was a kid after the Second World War. That was the ambition to get in a big public state, to be safe, to have your salary, and to get to the retirement. Zero problem. You have to work hard. Even not work hard, the place is safe. Now, if you don't deliver, you know, even the unions cannot save someone who doesn't deliver. Not anymore, because come on. You have to be there, to be ready, and try to give the best of yourself. And when it happens in the opera, even today is a miracle. When it happens, is something that gives you the energy for the next week, the next month, to try to take the best from yourself and try to create a better environment, a better society. That's why it's still important to deal with art more than with entertainment. Entertainment has to satisfy you in 1 second. Art engage you. It is a sort of company for life. Yeah. So it's we are facing this, and the world is changing. We are in a moment of transformation. Hey, who will get the solution, if there is any solution for this transformation? We'll be very lucky. But we are always to find out the way. It's nice. I think it's much more exciting than the life of my father, having just one work. Much safer, but it's more difficult.
It's more difficult.
It's more difficult. You don't have to take anything for granted. Just nothing. You don't have to take anything for granted. You have to, every time I go out to conduct on the podium, doesn't matter if I've conducted 100 good performances. If you do one so-so, the next one so-so, the third one so-so, you disappeared. You mean, oh, what is happening? If a singer cancels for 5 months, what is happening? Come on, everybody can get sick. Nowadays, you are not allowed to be sick. Oh, that is terrible. But from the other hand, you have always to show whatever you give is the maximum you can. The rest, the other people will judge.
I would like now, in the, let's say, last 10 minutes, to open this up for questions. If you would like to, if there's anyone here who would like to ask Maestro Noseda anything about what we've been talking about or about some other related subject.
When I started to work at the Meadows in 1974, there were people with sleeping bags in all of the corridors under Lincoln Center because they had to be the first ones to buy tickets. So I just wondered, And of course this was true in pop singing too, because there was Frank Sinatra and Perry Como, well, and mostly Italian ones. But is there any plan to promote the careers of great opera singers the way it used to happen?
I think in those years, probably, I remember referring to the years you were mentioning, in Italy we had 2 channels, Rai 1, Rai 2. It was not even Rai 1, Canale 1, Canale 2. So everybody in Italy was watching those canali, because you didn't have the possibility of having 200 and you make zapping. Either you decide this or that. If you try to make zapping, it's not even interesting, because you have 2 options. So in those years, in those days, to appear on television gave you the exposure of the greatest possible audience, because everybody was watching that program. Now, probably the people who are watching is the same or even bigger, but they are not watching 1 program. They are watching 2,000 programs. So the impact, if I go in television now, is not the impact I would have had 30 years ago if I would have been interviewed by Enzo Biaggi in Italy on Canale 1 of the Rai. Because everybody, especially Saturday night, Friday night, that also, we can do that. But today, in a way, with the web, the freedom is even bigger. You know, sometimes you go viral with incredible thing because you have an idea and you become famous overnight. It will last, I don't know, but for 3 days you will be the most famous singer in the world. I think the exposure in television is still important. In Italy, since 2012, Rai 5 is doing the opening in La Scala. I remember the last time was 78, 79, 1980. After that, it was not televised live anymore. So we are changing. In the last 4 years, we record, we just have some production televised in Torino. And so we try to find a way to connect with the widest possible people. But of course, the impact we have is divided in 2,000, let's say, if there are 2,000. Oh, of course, in Torino we are visited by an incredible number of kids from 6 till 14, something like 40,000 a year. Yeah. No, but there is also an interest in any opera house, in any symphonic institution, to how to connect, how a music institution of the 21st century should serve the society as they did after the Second World War. It's a completely different world, but we have to find out the way. If we only wait people coming where we are performing, probably we have to do vice versa. We have to bring the music somewhere where people live. It's challenging. It's intriguing. We have to find out the way. But yeah, it's a good point.
I just wanted to ask you, any favorite opera that resonates with you and make you happy every time that you conduct?
Oh yeah, there are so many operas that resonate inside me. Usually I'm very much in love with the opera I'm doing. So now I think Roméo and Juliette is a pretty good opera. If you tell me, is the opera you will take to the desert island? Probably not. But it's an opera I'm deeply loving now. I think from 29th of January, I will love the next one.
I think we have to, unfortunately, end here. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.